sow can apply to when we sow into things that affect us negatively and also positively. So it can deal with something where it's just, spiritual sense. It could be your bad habits. So if we sow into things that are bad for us, then, the things that are going to happen to us from, planting the seed and investing time into bad habits, we're going to probably, suffer from those consequences. So we're going to analyze this. So we're going to see when we sow into bad things, so wicked things. As verse 8 had mentioned from Galatians chapter 6, um, it's right after verse 7, we were just on it. It says, for the one who sows to please his flesh will from the flesh reap destruction. Can you believe that? So if you sow to please your own flesh, your flesh will reap destruction. It's pretty plain and simple right there. That if we decide to invest into things that only will bring destruction into our lives, to see what benefits us most. All right? So, and the reality is based on what we want and not really what and these decisions can not only hurt our relationship with Christ, but they will also hurt our relationship with the people around us. So we're letting selfishness into our hearts by investing into things that pleasure us. And we know the most dangerous part about investing into and you know what the most dangerous part about investing into what pleasures us is that it distracts us from what God has for us. So if we are sowing into things and we're investing our time and our efforts into things that are not pleasing to God, they're pleasing to the flesh, they're pleasing, they're sinful in nature, then we are isolating ourselves from Christ. We're separating ourselves from Christ. And we're not allowing God to really to have his way in our hearts. So let me see, sorry. It says that it distracts us from what God has for us. So if we're really just investing, if we're really in our lives, we let sin into our hearts. It really distracts us from what God has for us, and it separates us from God. And let me tell you that is exactly where the enemy wants to have you. He wants to have you in a state of mind where you are distracted from the promise that God has for you. That's what the enemy wants to do. And that, what that brings from, distraction, it brings destruction. Just like the verse had said, that if you reap, if you sow to what pleases the flesh will reap destruction. So in that case, it's really important that we don't, sow into things that are sinful. In Israel, and a good example of this is Israel. If we can go to Psalms chapter 78, verse 10 through 17. So Psalms chapter 78, verse 10 through 17. And it says, they did not keep God's covenant, but refused to walk according to the law. They forgot his works and the wonders that he had shown them. In the sight of their fathers, he performed wonders in the land of Egypt, in the field of Zoan. He divided the sea and let them pass through it. And made the waters stand like a heap. In the daytime, he led them with a cloud, and in the night with a fiery light. He split rocks in the wilderness and gave them drink abundantly, as from the deep. He made streams come out of the rock and caused waters to flow down like rivers. Yet they sinned still more against him, rebelling against the Most High in the desert. So what is it talking about here? In Psalm chapter 78, what we just read, it's talking about the nation of Israel. when they had been taken out from Egypt, and now they were in the desert. You know, they forgot. It says right here in verse 11, it says, they forgot his works and the wonders that he had shown them. So God had performed all these miracles. They had taken them out of Egypt. He had provided for them water when they needed it. God had provided that cloud, that shade from the sun, from the burning of the sun, and had given him the pillar of fire so they can walk and see where they were going in the night. So God did all these marvelous things to Israel. And yet, it says in verse 17, yet they sinned still more against him, rebelling against the Most High in the desert. And the nation of Israel, had made the decision that they were going to do things their own way. They weren't going to follow what God, the God of their fathers had done. In Exodus chapter 32, we see that while Moses was receiving the 10 Commandments, so this is the time that we were just talking about, on Mount Sinai, the Israelites asked Aaron to make them a god to lead them. Aaron told the Israelites to bring their god, their gold jewelry, and then used it to create a golden calf. He told the Israelites that the calf was their God who had brought them out of Egypt. So can you believe that? That the Israelites, immediately after God had taken them out of Egypt, they then, from the fear, from the doubt that they had in them, that Moses wasn't going to come down from the Mount of Sinai. They thought that Moses was gone over there, And so from that doubt, they decided, let's just make our own God. So they asked Aaron, and Aaron made that golden calf, and they worshipped it. And Aaron told them that this was the God that caused them that brought them out of Egypt. So can you believe that? They they allowed and they invested all their gold jewelry into idolatry. And that idolatry, it was in disobedience against God. It caused them to not just rebel against God, but to forget what God had done in their lives. So they had allowed